Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making a dust shroud for our drum thickness sander. Well, if you remember back a while ago, quite a while ago, in episode 2 of our ukulele build, I ended up having to fabricate a thickness sander powered by my lathe. And of course, although I ended up putting some form of dust collection on it, it sure as heck is not adequate, and we really need to boost that up. So on today's show, I'm going to try to come up with something. I'm not sure what. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, and I'm hoping that I'm going to have enough scrap and hardware to pull this off. But let's just see what I've got in the way of dust collection hardware first. Well, anyone that I've ever known that has ever had a dust collection system always has a spare part of some sort. And that always happens because you go to the woodworking store and you're thinking, oh, I need to get this for my dust collection. What do I need? I can't remember because I never bothered to make a list, because that, of course, that gives you an excuse to buy extra stuff. And we always do, and we always end up with spare parts, and I'm no exception. So this is a spare part that I found kicking around here in the shop, and this is where I'd like to start, and that is with the 4-inch intake for this collection. So now that I at least have my connection point for my collector to attach to, let's go over to the lathe and take a few measurements here so that we can decide exactly how it is that we're going to go about making this particular piece and attaching it to the lathe. Well, you can see here that we have this original bracket, and actually I'd like to keep that intact on the unit because I think that this bracket, as far as dust collection goes, will be usable on the lathe at a later point in time. So I'd really like to be able to utilize that. But it's this section here, which is this black ABS pipe that I used for my initial attempt, and that's the part that has to go. So I'm going to start by disassembling this and getting this pipe out of my way, and then we can start taking a few measurements as to what it is that we need here. Well, I think the first thing that we need to decide here is what kind of a design we'd like to have for this. And I'm thinking that in order to both double as a dust collection and a little bit of protection to keep my fingers out from here, I'd like to have the shroud completely encase this entire unit. So at this point, I guess I need to first decide exactly how wide it has to be. And in taking a measurement of my drum sander from outside to outside here, it's actually, if you incorporate the lip of the faceplate, we're looking at 15 3/4 inches wide. So it's actually quite a wide shroud that we're looking at. So I'm just going to scribble down that measurement of 15 3/4 across the width. The other measurement that we have to consider is, because I want it to fit right down over top of this thing, is exactly how wide we need the unit. And for that, we're going to need the rough measurement of how big these collars are that we turned. And I'm just going to get a rough measurement because it's going to be a little larger, but it looks like 7 inches is going to be a measurement that will suit us just fine. So again, I'm going to write that measurement down. And lastly, what we're going to need to know is how deep this shroud needs to be. And for that, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe 6 inches deep. So I'm going to go 6 inches high, and beyond that, I mean, the only real measurement that I'm going to want is on the end caps here, where it threads into both the headstock and the size of our live center at the tailstock. And the reason for that is there will be cutouts in either end to fit down over top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and measure those. You can measure yours, and we'll see exactly what size it is that we need for those cutouts. Well, let me just see if I can explain what it is that I have in mind. If this is our drum sander, and you'll just have to excuse my primary artistic abilities here, and hey, there's our sandpaper. Look at that. Boy, uncanny. It's like a photograph. And this is our headstock of our lathe. And this here is our live center at our tailstock of our lathe. What I'd like to have is a shroud that will come down right over here and come across the top like this and completely encase this particular unit. However, the dust collection port will be up top. So what I'd like to see here is a side shape of this unit, probably something in the neighborhood of this. Now, I don't know how feasible this is right now, and this would be our dust port, and this would be our cutout, which would house the head and tail stock at either end. I don't want to add too much weight to this project, so I'm thinking that I'm going to be making the top of this unit being this piece right here, and the side end caps being this piece right here, completely out of 1/2 inch plywood. And once I get those pieces cut, then I might finish up the housing with some 1/8 of an inch hardboard all the way around, just to encase the entire thing. So why don't we start with that? Let's start with some 1/2 inch ply. Well, we have two pieces of 1/2 inch ply, and we've cut them to 8 inches by 8 inches. And the first thing that I'd like to do here is I'd like to draw a center line on each of them, just to give us a reference point as to our layout. From here now, we need to figure out how wide we need the top of this in order to house our dust collection. Well, I've measured our dust collection port here, and this particular port is 6 by 6. Sorry, 6 1/4 by 6 1/4. So we need to get that centered on our dust shroud, and so it will essentially sit like this on the top of the dust shroud, as these are the ends. So we just want to mark here exactly where it is that this will be seated. So from the center here, we need to mark out for our 6 1/4. And there we have the marks that will coincide with our top, which will house our dust collection shroud. I really wanted to taper this out a little more, and it doesn't look like that's going to be happening for me, but I'm going to carry on anyway. Like I said, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, so I'm hoping for some good results when this is done. Now, we had said that because of the drum and how we wanted it to sit, we wanted the height of this thing to be 6 inches. Yes, that is true. Overall, 6 inches will make it so that it sits above our drum, but truthfully, we only need half that distance because of the center point of our sanding drum. So we're going to mark a line at 3 inches, and this is going to represent the center of our tailstock, or the center of our live center. From here, we also said that we wanted a cutout in the ends for the live center and for the headstock or the faceplate. And I measured that out to be 1 5/8, and that should give us plenty of clearance in order to shroud over those end pieces of the lathe, being the faceplate and the live center. So at this point, we're going to draw a 1 5/8 inch diameter circle here, and then carry the lines on down for our cutout. And there will be the cutout for our head and tail stock of the lathe. The next layout line that you want to place on this will be from the edge where we measured here for our dust collection attachment, right down to our center mark here at 3 inches up from the bottom. We're going to connect those 2 points to give us a little bit of a taper. I would have liked a little more, but like I said, it's just not feasible at this point, and I'm hoping that this is going to do well for us with our dust collection. If not, I'll redesign it and do it again, but for now, this is what we're going to be looking at, and that will be a line just like that. So now what we're going to do is I'd like to take this over to the scroll saw, and I want to cut out these center pieces here so that we can make sure that they fit over top of our head and tailstock of our lathe. And there we have our cutout. So I'm just going to take it over to the lathe now and sit the ends down over top of the head and tailstock and just make sure that I have the proper clearance that I was hoping for in the first place. Well, we've checked the fit on the lathe and I'm quite happy with it. It's got plenty of clearance around the inside of here for both the head and the tailstock. So now all I want to do now is measure this angle that we've marked here so that I can cut it properly over on the table saw. And if I line this up here and take a measurement just like that, we are looking at 10 degrees. We're 10 degrees off of square. So I'm going to take this over to the table saw. I'm going to set my miter fence to a 10-degree angle, and I am going to lop off these pieces right here off of both of our end caps for our dust collection. And there we have our 2 pieces cut for our side end caps ready to go. But just to point it out, guys, take your time and pay attention to what you're doing when it comes to cutting these pieces. Otherwise, you're going to end up with one of these. And what this ends up being is designer firewood and nothing more. So don't do like I did. Just let's burn that and pretend that no mistakes happened, and keep the 2 good ones, but just pay attention to which side you're cutting that 10-degree angle from. Now at this point in time, we'd like to cut our top piece of ply, but we're going to have to angle the sides so that they match the profile of those end caps. Let me just show you what I mean. Just hang on one second. So this is our end caps, and what I mean is there's going to be a board being the top of our dust shroud that will sit right here, but we want the edges to mate with these 10-degree cuts that we've made. So I've gone ahead and set the table saw for a 10-degree bevel. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to rip that plywood so that I've got a 10-degree bevel on this side and a 10-degree on this side. And that way what we're going to end up with is a piece that will fit beautifully inside here. So just give me a second. I'm going to go cut this and show you what we end up with. And here we have the 10-degree angles cut here, the bevels. And what we're going to do is just line this up and line up on this side. And you can see how nicely that lines up there with the 10-degree miter cut in this piece and the 10-degree bevel cut in our top upright piece. And that's going to go a long way to helping us when we're putting our 1/8 inch hardboard along this edge to getting a nice tight seam there. And you want that tight seam so that you're not getting air leakage and the dust flying out of that hole. So that's great, we've got that cut, but now we need to cut this piece to length. Well, now we're going to go over to the table saw. We want to reset everything back to 90 degrees. So reset your table saw blade back so that it's square to the table. Reset your miter fence so that it's no longer at 10 degrees. And we need to decide on the length for this particular top. Now you want to remember that the end caps are going to be placed in on either end, so butt it up to this. So this will be an interior dimension. And what you want to do is you want to make it just a little bit bigger than what the full width of the two end caps are on your sander. So in this particular case, to give myself a little bit of room in there, I think I'm going to cut this to 16 5/8. And now, just like we've done so many times on this show, we've clamped things together for a dry fit. And I've just got it sat in place there. It's not in its final resting place by any means, but it does give me an indication to show me that we're in the right direction here. So now with that being done, and I'm happy with the way things are fitting, we need to mark and cut the center hole for our 4-inch dust collection. So I'm going to unclamp this and we're going to start working on that top piece. Well, here we have the top of our dust shroud, and as I said, we need to work on the area for our 4-inch port of our collector. So the first thing we're going to do is mark a line in the center of this top of the shroud, and once we get this center line marked, we're going to mark the center along this way as well. And now that we have that done, we need to draw the cutout or the circle for our 4-inch port. And here's our port here, and we can measure this across if we like. It's a little smaller than 4 inches, but that's because our hose goes over this. This is the internal dimension of the hose. But we're going to draw a 4-inch circle here, draw a blade entry hole, and once we get that done, we're going to take it over to the scroll saw and cut it out. And there we have the 4-inch hole cut. So at this point in time now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to give this a light sanding, and then I'm going to glue the side flanges onto either end and clamp this up. We're going to use some small number 6 screws just to secure it in the end here. And just get everything nicely put together before we start putting our 1/8 inch hardboard around the shroud. Just to make things a little easier for us, we're going to put a center line here at the top of our shroud. That will be for drilling pilot holes for our mounting screws here so that we can put the top piece in with our number 6 screws. So you may want to go ahead and do that. Draw some center lines there just to give you an idea of where it is that you want to drill your holes. And there we have the body or the basis of our dust shroud for the thickness sander. So at this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a chance to set up a little bit. I'm going to clean up some of the stuff that we've taken out that we've used. Going to clean up this squeeze out here a little bit. And we can also drill some mounting holes in that plastic receptacle that goes on here to take our 4-inch hose, and we can drill and screw that into place. And then we're going to get some 1/8 inch hardboard, and we can start cutting it to length to mount across the faces of our dust shroud. You can see here now that we've got the dust collector port mounted on top of our shroud. I just mounted it with some number 8 by 1/2 inch screws just so they wouldn't stick down through the bottom of it. We've also cleaned up the squeeze out that was on the sides here. And now what we want to do is attach some pieces of hardboard just like this to the outside. And I've cut 4 pieces at 17.5 inches long, and that coincides with the length of this unit. So this isn't rocket science here. I'm not even going to measure. All I'm going to do is hold up a piece of hardboard, line it up, and then right where this angle at the bottom ends, I'm going to put a little mark there, set my fence with my table saw, and rip 2 pieces to coincide with this width. And there we have one sitting in place. And all we're going to do is the same like what we did up here at the top. We're going to put a line across here to represent the center of this 1/2 inch ply. And I'm not even going to glue these down. I want them to be removable. So I'm just going to drill some pilot holes here, and using some 1/2 inch by number 8 screws, I'm going to mount this board to both sides of our dust shroud. And there we have our piece cut, and using a little bit of blue painter's tape to help us hold it in place, we're going to go ahead and drill a little pilot hole here and screw this down onto our enclosure. So I'm going to go ahead and continue here to screw this in the rest of the way, and then when I get both of these sides mounted on, I'll come back and see you after that, and we'll carry on to these sections. Well, we've got both of those sides mounted, and now just like we did the first time, I'm not even going to bother measuring. Just going to sit this board like this. We're going to go up underneath with a pencil, give a little mark right up under here to show us where to set our fence, and we're going to go ahead and rip 2 pieces. And just like what we did here, couple pilot holes, couple 1/2 inch by number 8 screws, and attach this section. So go ahead and do that, and then we're starting to actually look like something here, at least a box anyway. And then go ahead and do that and come back and see me. And there we have our dust shroud. There is one thing that I would like to do here, and that involves the seam between these two pieces. And I think what I'm going to do is just run a piece of duct tape along here just to give that a little extra seal and to make it so that no fine particles of dust are coming out through those slots. Even though they could potentially come out through here, it doesn't matter. At least I've taken care of one of them. So go ahead and place a nice piece of duct tape right across each one of those seams. And there we have that inside seam sealed up with some duct tape. So now that we have this done, let's take this over to the sander and see what we can do about mounting it using that hardware that I had there from before. Well, as you can see, I've got this overarm dust collection pipe, and this is the same one that I used with the 1.5" ABS with the dust collection before, and I'd like to utilize this for this particular collector. And all I have to do at this point in time is screw the mounting bracket, which you can see resting on top of the shroud. Just have to screw that down onto the dust shroud, hook up some hoses, and I think we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this up, make the adjustments so that it's up above the table, because obviously at the moment it's sitting on the table and that's not going to be any good for us. But I'm going to go ahead and make these adjustments, set this thing up, and let's take it for a test spin. Well, I have no idea how this is going to go, but we're going to go ahead and I'm going to run this rough piece of walnut through, and let's just see how much dust it creates. I know what there was before, and maybe I'll try to find a clip of what it was before to show you guys how much dust was flying around, and we'll see if this makes it any better. Well, I've run this walnut board through for 3 full passes, and the board's about 6 to 7 inches wide. So it's a pretty good test with 3 full passes on this. I've not done anything with this other than shut off the dust collector. So I'm just going to raise this up and let's see how much dust we actually have here on the table. I know that before there was piles of it. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but there is some dust that's still on the table. That's the last little bit that gets brushed off as the stock goes through the sander, but that is absolutely nothing in comparison to what was flying around the room and what was sitting on this table before, as well as the added bonus of not having or not being able to have your fingers in close proximity to the drum due to the shroud completely encasing this. I might consider turning this front face into plexi just so that I could also see inside and see what's going on. That may be a modification in the near future to this particular shroud, but all in all, I'm going to say that this one is a success. And there you have it. A dust shroud for our shop-made thickness sander. Guys, I'm chalking this up as a full success. I mean, it's not pretty, it's not fine woodworking, but it sure as heck does the job. It keeps a heck of a lot of the dust out of the air and into the collector where it belongs. Absolutely fantastic. I wish I had done it initially, but hindsight's 20/20 and it's on there now. If you guys don't have anything like this overarm dust collection thing that I've got attached here, that's no big deal. I'm sure you can think of some way to mount this particular shroud to your lathe. And for those of you who are watching this wondering, what the heck is he talking about thickness sander? I guess maybe you shouldn't have skipped out on the ukulele build. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.